Hello guys, skipping past the usual introduction. Today we'll be talking about client-side routing, and I'll keep this one short. So to begin with, the first question is, why do we need client-side routing at all, or routing in general? So looking back at history, what used to happen is you'll have some page A, right, which you are able to see, for example, after entering some URL, which basically fetches the page A from the server, right? Now next time you click on a link, or let's say a navigation button, a request goes back to the server, gives back a new page entirely, right? So this is this used to be the old way of doing things. Now, given that most of the elements on the page may or may not change across different pages, there have been certain optimizations in order to mitigate this whole request and fetching the entire resource again. So on server-side routing, what usually happens is a request still goes back to the server, but a chunk of the page that is required to be re-rendered, for example something within the app shell, may be returned as an output. This again depends on how the library that you're using for server-side routing has been implemented. So for example, only the content within this changes and the app shell stays the same, so there's no point in fetching this resource again from the server, right? This is for server side rendered apps. Of course, the trivial thing to do is rendering the entire page again and sending it. So in client-side applications, like we have discussed before, the page is practically empty and the JavaScript is the thing that is rendering things, right? So there is just one request, which is the initial request, which brings this page and the resources required to render it. But the subsequent changes in URL through the app, or maybe by changing the URL directly, is intercepted by the JavaScript library which you are using for routing and will not be sent to the server, right? Instead, the page is re-rendered from the JavaScript itself, and the entire logic for re-rendering the entire application, or rather page navigations, is there in the JavaScript itself, the very first bundle that is fetched, usually, unless you are deploying code splitting in your code base. So if you already have the entire application in your JavaScript, I mean the logic to render your entire application, there is no point in sending these requests. So in client-side rendered applications, which are usually single page applications, you have no communication with the server whatsoever apart from REST API calls, which are basically used to populate data, right? So you get back some JSON output and you populate the data using the JavaScript logic that you have, and the initial request, of course, which is obviously required because you need the HTML to begin with, right? So this is the entire logic of client-side routing, and this is why you need it, because else every time you change the URL, you are fetching the resources again. So it is no more client-side rendered application, rather a server-side rendered application, and the whole advantage of rendering the entire application on the client is lost. So every single page application framework or library has some or the other implementation for routing, because this is a very common concept. Even Nest.js has its own routing, which is a server-side rendering framework. React has its own router. Angular has its own router. So it's pretty simple to use. So React apparently had a nice routing library for a long time, and now they have updated it. Right, so v6 is something I haven't worked with yet, so I'm just gonna read something and try to implement it in our code. So to begin with, let's check out to master and make sure we have the latest code. So git fetch origin master, git reset hard origin master, git log, and okay, we have the latest code now. So now I'm going to branch out feature / routing. Now I can start working on this. So let's see this. I'm going to read through this. I'll just add this in the description in case you want to read it as well. So let's start with installing it. So the @next is basically used to describe that we wish to use the v6 because it's still in alpha. I think some of them are in beta as well, but the official versions are still like behind, so we want to make use of v6. All right, so apparently v6 has a much smaller bundle size, so that is a good news for us as well. Right, so we are going to make use of browser router, which basically makes use of the history API of your browser. Let's start with this. I hope and the installation is done. Cool. So app, what's up? Yeah, sure, fix it. So we have to wrap the entire application within the browser router. I mean, that is how the documentation defines it, so we'll do that. Browser, oh sorry, so the as keyword basically renames the import in place, and this is actually not specific to import, it is rather specific to destructuring itself. So anytime you destructure an object, you can do something like this. So router, routes, and the names of the components, right? So routes, then a route. And what all things does it expect us to give? I believe it requires an element, so element is our app shell. No more child. The path will be /. So again, it requires a child, right? But we are not going to supply child because the way route accepts an element is like this, so we would not be able to dynamically supply children now. So obviously it will have something to help us with that. Let's take a look. Okay, so we can use routes like this as well. Cool. So I mean, we can have nested routes, or rather routes within components as well, like deeply nested. We have relative routes. Okay, so okay, so this is relative route. So dashboard / invoices will render this. Okay, cool. Hold on. Okay, so the outlet is required. So you need the outlet to render children apparently, because invoices has these nested routes. So invoices, then let's say invoice slash send, invoices slash sent. So this element will be rendered inside this. So this basically solves our dynamic child problem. And how it is rendered, so invoices component is here, and he says this element renders the element for the child route, which in this case will be either sent invoice and okay. All right, so we'll just have to use this instead of the child prop. So you can get rid of this for now, and we'll import outlet. Okay, definitely an order problem fixed. Okay, let's test this real quick. Yeah, so route, let's nest this real quick. So I've created some dummy components to help me with this. One is settings, one is dashboard itself. So the element is dashboard, will auto import it, thank you. The path will make use of the relative path. So when app shell opens and there is nothing in the path, dashboard will open by default, so we'll keep it at slash. All right, and when it says settings, we'll specifically open settings, and we'll have to import, what is it called, setting. Sorry, it's yeah, it's settings. Did I forget to name it right? Settings. Settings. Okay, so settings. All right. Okay, let's try this real quick. Npm run, oh sorry, npm start. Some error, I believe. So I finally found the issue. After looking over the internet, I landed on the page I should have started with. So this is the breaking change. History is a peer API now, so sorry, peer dependency. So history API, history, npm install. Okay, I hope this will fix the issue. So install dash dash save. Okay, npm start. Yes, finally. Okay, so this has missing steps. Can we add comments here? No way to add comments, huh? Message. No way to add my email. Screw that. So we weren't following this, were we? Think. Where was it? Anyway, moving on with this. Now it should work just fine. App shell. Yep. So dashboard, and if I change this manually, settings, right? Okay, so let's make a catch all route in case nothing matches. So also what we'll do is, this is for our application root, right? When it is logged in, what we can do is we can have another route for let's say a login page. So we'll name this login. We'll copy paste things. Rename this real quick. I think we should call it auth actually, not login. So auth and this page specifically kind of falls out of the jurisdiction of app shell, so we'll keep this out. Import auth from user/auth, and let's name this login. Right, so route needs to be yeah, now it should be fine. So login will directly open the auth page, so auth here, and we'll have a different looking page for it because we don't want it inside our app shell. App shell should look like an entirely different application, so it is outside. Auth is here. Okay. Later on we'll apply protection on these routes so that in case the user is not authorized, these routes are not accessible. We'll also need a catch-all kind of route, so in case nothing matches, can do something like this. But for the element, do we have a redirect somewhere? So navigation, React router, GitHub, releases. Yep. So major change, redirect to. Okay, is there a navigate? You can still render navigate, but it won't actually update the page until the next render. Major change, redirect was removed. Okay, we no longer support redirecting on the initial render due to compatibility issues with future versions of React. That won't let us access component on initial render. Okay, so they're suggesting to make use of the history API and outside of uh, the React router itself. Interesting. Let's go to API reference. Let's see, path. Do we have something like we don't have that, a catch all route kind of thing. We don't have it here. Okay, interesting. So we will not add it right now. Maybe look for a fix later on. Okay, let's see if our login is working, by the way. So sure, why not? Okay, login, authors here, cool. We can have further like descendant routes here as well, in case if you want to do routing inside settings as well. For example, different navigations to different settings items, so that is also possible, but again we won't get there until we implement the settings page. And what am I missing? There's definitely something. Oh, okay, so changing navigation based on where the person clicks, right? So let's see what we have found for navigation links is basically something called a Nav Link. Nav Link is again part of the React Router DOM, and a difference that you need to note is that there is something called link as well, but Nav Link has a special property where it knows which Nav Link is active, so you can apply an active class or an active style. So let's do that. Yeah, so again, Nav Link and link, these tags are designed in such a way that they will not hamper with whatever styles you have already applied underneath. So this will be something like this, and a to prop. Let's get rid of this active class name for now, so we don't need it. Nav link active class name will be active, or anything you like, and to would be to the path that we want to go to when we click on this. This will be, let's call this path canvas, Nav link, and similarly call this path settings, Nav link. Right, now the thing is, the active class will be applied on Nav link itself, and the styles are being applied from icon wrapper. So the problem is we will not be able to change things based on active class from within icon wrapper, because a descendant cannot really check whether or not it is being wrapped by a class from an ancestor. So we'll have to apply the styles from top. Now what we can do is we can either target the nav link itself using using the native element underneath it. So nav link is basically an A tag, or we can target it from primary icon container. So both ways will work. I would say let's go with the primary icon container because this is under our control and it would be less invasive that way. So now styles, where are the styles that change on active class, right? So this is what changes on active class. So what we'll do is first off we'll move it to primary icon container, right? Secondly, ampersand means ampersand is basically something we get from the SAS way of writing. So ampersand points to the element within which you are writing the styles. So this is kind of a nested CSS which is not available in your primitive CSS. I still recommend the primitive CSS for learning because it's more it's clearer to understand, I would say. So here, when the styles are concatenated like this means the element which has a active class. So if you hover over this, I think in some cases it will even tell you what it is pointing to. No, it is not in this case. Never mind. So we want to say the icon wrappers. Okay, we need to point to the icon wrappers itself. So in styled components, you can target specific styled components directly by doing this. So if you go to this section referring to other components in the advanced section, this is how you do it. So icon wrapper, I'm gonna say any child of or rather, yeah, any descendant of primary icon container which does not have an active class, and when I hover over it, so what is that element on which I'm hovering? It is icon wrapper, right? So ampersand icon wrapper. So primary icon containers descendant which does not have active class, this whatever element this evaluates to be the descendant of that, which happens to be icon wrapper, and when I hover over it, this is the style which will be applied. So one thing to remember is whenever you are writing CSS selectors, the element that will be selected is the last element that you are writing. So even in this case, the last element is this, not this. So this asterisk is the element that you're targeting with your style, so keep that in mind. Similarly, the bottom styles will be something like this, and that should be it. Now going back to this, if I select settings, okay, so the thing that's happening is we have two active classes. Why is that? Because the route says slash. Okay, so slash basically matches for every style. So even if I'm at dashboard, what it is thinking is, hey, this slash is active, right? So for app shell, the slash basically activates this, which is incorrect. So we'll have to find a workaround around this, but for now we'll just rename this to something nice. So dashboard, and change it to dashboard as well. Save all stops working for some reason, I don't know why. Now it should work fine. Yeah, canvas does not have an it does not have an element, so it's not working. Dashboard, settings, login. Right, cool. Now one more thing that I think I should do is there's an abrupt change in colors. So an icon wrapper, what I'll do is I'll add this transition. What all colors are changing? Color let's do all. Right, do it for a 0.5 do it over 0.5 seconds and do it linear. It doesn't work. Why is that? Let's check the ambient reference. Oh, S has to be there. Can we target multiple elements at once? Transition 0.5 S. That's too slow. 0.1, too fast maybe. Yeah, better. So transition basically transitions the property that you are targeting. So you can transition individual elements with different timings as well. And I think that's all.